What if I told you the biggest threat to your growth, your peace, your power, isn't out there in the world, but living inside your own mind? It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't protect you, it deceives you. And if you don't destroy it, it will quietly destroy everything you're trying to build. This enemy has a name, ego. And the moment you stop seeing it as a guide and start confronting it as a barrier is the moment everything begins to change. Your ego will whisper to you in moments of silence. It will tell you that you're better than others, that you've arrived, that you're beyond correction or criticism. It will dress itself in confidence, but make no mistake, what it offers is not real power. It's a mask, a fragile shell meant to protect an identity that's terrified of vulnerability, terrified of growth. The ego is a liar, and the most dangerous kind, because it convinces you it's your ally. It tells you it's got your back, when all it's doing is building a prison around you brick by brick. The ego doesn't want you to listen. It doesn't want you to reflect. It wants you to react, defend, and control. It doesn't care about the truth. It only cares about perception, the way people see you, the way you appear to win, the illusion of superiority. But the problem with illusions is they vanish the moment you step into reality. The moment life humbles you, and it always does. Life is ruthless with the proud and generous to the humble. The ego tells you to pretend you already know, but that mindset will cost you everything. Because when you're not willing to learn, you've already begun to lose. Think about the moments in your life where you failed, not because you lacked talent, but because you refused to admit you were wrong. You refused help. You refused to look deeper. That wasn't your strength failing you, that was your ego. That part of you that cares more about looking strong than being strong. That part that confuses attention for respect. That part that would rather die proving a point than live embracing change. It's seductive, isn't it? The ego makes you feel big when you're actually small. It gives you temporary highs, pride, applause, praise, but none of those things build character. None of them deepen your soul. They only feed the beast, and the more you feed it, the more it needs. You become addicted to the approval of others, to validation, to being right, and you start to avoid the things that truly challenge you. You avoid the uncomfortable truths, you reject honest feedback, you distance yourself from people who don't flatter you, and without realizing it, you shrink. Real power isn't loud. It doesn't have to flex, brag, or dominate. Real power is calm, focused, and open. It doesn't crumble when challenged. It doesn't get defensive when someone else shines. It's grounded in something deeper than ego. It's grounded in truth. And truth doesn't need to be dressed up or protected. It just is. The ego will try to convince you that letting go of pride is weakness, that admitting fault is defeat, that humility is submission. But it's the opposite. Only the strong can be humble. Only those who are secure in themselves can open their minds and hearts without fear. You don't need to pretend you have it all together. You don't need to win every argument. You need to grow. And growth demands that you lay down your ego and pick up discipline, curiosity, and courage. Ego doesn't want courage. It wants comfort. It wants the same predictable patterns that keep you stagnant but feeling superior. The same relationships that don't challenge you. The same excuses. The same fake strength. But you were not built to stay the same. You were built to evolve, to rise, to refine yourself. That journey begins when you stop lying to yourself. You are not always right. You don't know everything. You have blind spots. You have weaknesses. And there's nothing wrong with that. Unless you let your ego keep you from facing it. The truth will set you free, but first it will break your pride. It will crush your false identity. It will burn the layers that were never really you. And that is a gift. That is the beginning of becoming who you really are beneath all the noise. So kill the ego. Every day, kill it in silence, in stillness, in surrender. Kill it by listening more than you speak. Kill it by admitting when you're wrong. Kill it by seeking discomfort, choosing humility, and walking away from the applause you don't need. Because the strongest version of you isn't the one that wins the argument. It's the one that walks away wiser, deeper, freer. Don't let a fragile identity built on ego be the reason you never reach your full potential. Let the false self die so the real you can finally live. You can feel the difference between real confidence and ego the moment they enter a room. One doesn't have to say a word. It doesn't need to puff its chest or dominate the conversation. It's composed, grounded, deliberate. The other is loud, always talking, always needing to be seen, always fragile under pressure. Ego is all performance. True confidence is quiet strength. You see, ego shouts because it's afraid no one is listening. It thrives on noise, on external approval, on being right, even when it's wrong. But true confidence doesn't need an audience. It doesn't depend on applause. It's forged in silence, in repetition, in the countless hours when no one is watching. The confident man doesn't need to win the spotlight. He becomes the light by how he carries himself. It's not about attention, it's about presence. It's about being so anchored in who you are that you no longer seek validation from others to feel whole. When ego walks into a room, it sizes everyone up. Who's the biggest? Who's getting the attention? Who can I outshine? It sees others as threats, but confidence doesn't compare. It doesn't compete with noise. It creates its own standard. Confidence says, I know who I am, and I'm not here to prove it to you. That's power. That's what ego will never understand. Because ego is insecure. It masks its fear behind arrogance, behind false certainty, behind fragile pride that collapses the second it's tested. Let me ask you something real. Have you ever had to prove you were strong by raising your voice? Have you ever needed to dominate a room not because it made you better, but because you were afraid of being overlooked? That wasn't strength. That was ego trying to convince the world and yourself that you mattered, that you were enough. But if you really were enough, why did you need to prove it? The deepest confidence grows from humility, from knowing your worth without demanding that others constantly affirm it. Confidence listens before it speaks. It doesn't fear silence. It doesn't seek comfort in attention. It seeks truth. And truth is often quiet. It's not dressed in gold or covered in noise. It just is. When you're confident in your value, you don't chase validation. You walk in it. Ego won't let you do that. It tells you to react, to defend, to attack. It makes every disagreement personal, every correction an insult, every challenge a threat. Ego can't handle not being the smartest in the room, but confidence can sit with not knowing and be at peace, because it understands that learning isn't a threat, it's a gift. And growth doesn't happen through proving. It happens through listening, absorbing, evolving. Confidence isn't built in the moments when you feel strong. It's built in the moments when you feel weak and choose to rise anyway. When your work is overlooked, but you stay consistent. When your character is questioned, but you don't retaliate. When the world doubts you, and you keep showing up. Not louder. That's where real power lives. That's where ego can't survive. And here's the truth most won't tell you. The people who try the hardest to look confident are usually the most insecure. The louder the ego, the quieter the soul. Real confidence doesn't have to scream because it's already heard from within. It doesn't have to impress because it's already expressed through action, not appearance. You want to lead? Be still. You want to influence? Be humble. You want to last? Be grounded, because ego will rise quickly and fall even faster. It's a house built on sand. But confidence, true, earned, tested confidence, is a fortress. It doesn't flinch in the storm. It doesn't beg for approval. It just stands. So kill the need to be loud. Kill the urge to perform. Let go of needing to be the most impressive in the room. Let your results speak. Let your discipline speak. Let your character speak. Because when you embody true confidence, the world listens, even in your silence. Let your presence whisper what your ego used to scream. Ego is clever. It convinces you that it's strength, that it's the reason people respect you, the armor that keeps you from being hurt, the fuel that drives your ambition. But underneath that illusion, ego is a thief. It robs you of the very things that make life meaningful: connection, growth, peace. And it does it so quietly that most people don't realize they've been stripped bare until it's too late. When you lead with ego, you put up walls. You might call them standards or boundaries, but deep down, they're defense mechanisms. You're not protecting your energy. You're isolating yourself. You're not guarding your peace. You're avoiding vulnerability. Ego fears real connection because connection requires honesty, humility, and openness. It means admitting you don't have all the answers. It means being seen, truly seen, without the mask. And that terrifies the ego, because ego can't survive when your truth shows up. You ever wonder why so many powerful people feel alone? Why some of the most outwardly successful individuals wrestle in silence with anxiety, depression, and emptiness? It's because ego pushed everyone away. It made it impossible to be taught, to be challenged, to be comforted. And when the storm came, there was no one left standing beside them. Not because people didn't care, but because ego didn't let them get close. Ego says, "I know enough." Confidence says, "I have more to learn." Okay. That one difference separates the wise from the foolish. The moment you stop learning, the moment you shut your ears to feedback, to correction, to new perspectives, that's the moment you stop growing. And ego loves that moment. It thrives on stagnation. Because the more you pretend to know everything, the less you seek truth. And the less you seek truth, the more you live in illusion. The most dangerous thing about ego is that it pretends to be clarity. It makes you believe your way is the only way, that admitting you're wrong makes you weak, that apologizing is beneath you. But in reality, ego doesn't make you powerful, it makes you blind. It traps you in a cage of your own self-importance, and from inside that cage, everything looks like a threat. Every person with a different opinion becomes an enemy. Every lesson becomes an attack. Every opportunity to grow becomes a missed chance, because you were too busy trying to prove that you already had it all figured out. Now, let's talk about peace. Inner peace is not found in dominance. It's not found in being right all the time. It's not found in being admired or envied. Peace is born when you stop needing to posture, when you're no longer consumed with how you appear, how you're perceived, or whether you're ahead of the next man. Peace is quiet. It's the kind of quiet that comes when you stop battling the world just to protect a fragile identity. It's the kind of quiet that comes when you no longer fear being wrong or soft or misunderstood. That quiet is the death of ego and the birth of true power. You want to deepen your relationships? Kill your ego. You want to evolve into your highest self? Kill your ego. You want to sleep at night without your mind waging war on your worth? Kill your ego, not because ego is evil, but because it's afraid. It's fear dressed up as pride. It's insecurity wearing the costume of confidence. And the moment you let go of it, even a little, everything starts to shift. You listen better, you see clearer, you stop taking things so personally, you become teachable again. And that humility? That's where transformation begins. That's where the door opens to deeper bonds, deeper understanding, and a deeper self. Some of the most life-changing moments you'll ever experience will come not when you're proving something to the world, but when you drop the performance and allow yourself to just be. That version of you, stripped of ego, is where real strength lives. That's where peace enters. That's where connection grows. That's where learning becomes a joy instead of a threat. Ego builds walls, but the best version of you builds bridges. And the sooner you tear down what ego has built, the sooner you'll become unstoppable. Not because of what you appear to be, but because of who you finally are underneath it all. The need to always be right is one of the heaviest chains a person can wear. It masquerades as strength, but it's weakness in disguise. It gives you a false sense of control, a fleeting feeling of superiority, but at what cost? Your growth, your relationships, your peace, because the truth is, you cannot evolve while clinging to the need to be right. Growth demands humility. Transformation demands surrender. And wisdom demands that you value learning more than pride. There's a part of us that desperately wants to be seen as correct, as knowledgeable, as powerful. And it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that being right all the time is what makes us valuable. But life doesn't reward the one who is always right. Life rewards the one who is willing to listen, to adapt, to admit when they're wrong and choose better. Because that person is not protecting their ego, they're honoring their evolution. Think about it. If you're always right, then there's nothing left to learn. And if there's nothing left to learn, then you stop growing. The mind that's obsessed with being right is like a cup already full. No room for new ideas. No room for better perspectives. No room for truth. Just the same recycled thoughts, reinforced by the same stubborn pride. And that kind of mind becomes rigid, brittle. Eventually, it breaks. I've seen people destroy friendships, business opportunities, even their own inner peace, all because they couldn't let go of the need to be right. They couldn't say, you know what, I got that wrong. They couldn't say, help me understand. They couldn't say, maybe there's more I haven't considered. And in doing so, they chose being right over being real. They chose pride over growth. They chose to win the argument and lose the wisdom. And don't misunderstand. There's nothing weak about admitting you're wrong. That takes courage most people don't have. It takes maturity to step back and say, I don't know everything. I could have handled that better. I still have work to do. That kind of honesty is a rare power, and it's the foundation of every great transformation. Because you can't become more if you're too busy defending who you are now. The ego will always whisper, don't admit it, don't look foolish, don't lose face. But evolution doesn't care about appearances. It doesn't care about your pride. It only responds to honesty, to the willingness to let go of what no longer serves you, even if that's your own belief in being right. And when you do that, when you trade certainty for curiosity, you step into a version of yourself that's open, agile, unshakable, not because you've mastered the world, but because you've mastered your mind. And here's the irony, when you no longer need to be right, you become wiser. You hear more, you see more, you learn faster, you grow deeper, and the respect you were trying to earn through force or pride, it starts coming naturally. Because people are drawn to humility, to presence, to those who are willing to speak truth, even when it costs them their image. If you always have to be right, then every disagreement becomes a threat. Every challenge becomes a personal attack. Every conversation becomes a battlefield. But when you're secure in who you are, you don't need to win the moment. You don't need to dominate the room. You don't need to protect your status. You're free to listen, free to admit what you missed, free to evolve. The wisest people I've ever known didn't speak to prove their brilliance. They spoke to seek truth. They were more interested in asking questions than giving answers. And when they got it wrong, they didn't shrink. They leaned in. They understood that growth isn't linear and that being wrong doesn't define you. Staying wrong does. So ask yourself, what are you holding onto so tightly that it's keeping you from your next level? What belief, what pride, what identity are you so desperate to protect that it's stopping you from hearing the truth? Let it go. Not because you're weak, but because you've outgrown it. There comes a moment in every person's journey, if they're truly honest with themselves, where they're forced to confront a truth that shakes them. It's the moment where the image they've built, the titles they've clung to, the stories they've told themselves about who they are, all fall away. That moment is terrifying, but it is sacred, because it is the moment where real growth begins, and it only arrives after the ego dies. The ego, for most people, isn't just a bad habit, it's their identity. It's how they define themselves. I am successful. I am important. I am always right. I don't need help. That voice feeds on comparison, thrives on validation, and drowns out the quiet truth inside you. As long as you're attached to it, you're imprisoned by it. And growth can't happen inside a cage. When the ego dies, it feels like you're losing something. It feels like weakness. It feels like defeat. But what's actually happening is the opposite. You're being stripped of everything false, everything fragile, everything you were never meant to carry. And what's left? What remains when the ego is gone? Power, stillness, clarity, the kind that can't be taken away by opinions, failures, or applause. You see, the ego convinces you that you're only as good as your last success. It whispers, don't risk, don't fall, don't admit you're learning. But the soul says, try again. Stay open, be humbled. That's where your strength lives. The truth is, every time you let go of ego, you create room for insight, for transformation, for wisdom that no trophy can offer. Most people never experience their highest self because they're too busy protecting their current self. They're too busy defending the person they were yesterday instead of becoming the person they're meant to be tomorrow. And why? Because ego doesn't want change. It wants comfort. It wants the illusion of control. But growth, real growth, is uncomfortable. It forces you to admit that who you've been isn't enough for where you're going. There's nothing more liberating than saying, I was wrong. I don't know yet. I need help. I still have work to do. Those are the words of someone who is not trying to impress, but trying to evolve. That's the mindset of someone who has burned the mask and chosen the truth. And that truth will shape you into someone unrecognizable in the best way. Do you want to know what true peace feels like? It's not applause, it's not dominance. It's not always being the smartest person in the room. It's the calm of no longer needing to prove yourself. It's the freedom to simply be, to grow without pressure, to change without shame, to fail without fear. And that only comes after ego death. That only comes when you stop clinging to who you were and fully embrace who you could be. People often ask, how do I level up? How do I become unshakable? The answer is simple, but not easy. You surrender the need to look good. You abandon the obsession with being right. You face your limitations with courage, not denial. You allow the fire of humility to burn away everything you don't need. That's how you grow, not by building walls, but by tearing them down. And understand this, ego death doesn't happen once. It happens over and over again. Every time you rise to a new level, the ego tries to follow. It tries to disguise itself again. This time it might say, "You're more enlightened than them. You've figured it out." But stay awake, stay humble, because every level of growth demands a deeper level of surrender. Some of the most powerful transformations I've ever witnessed didn't come from people who had it all figured out. They came from people who were finally honest enough to admit they didn't. People who stopped performing and started listening. People who stopped chasing significance and started embodying truth. And that can be you. You don't need to carry your image another step. You don't need to defend who you were yesterday. Let it fall apart. Let the ego die, and in its place you'll find something far greater, a version of you who doesn't just look strong, but actually is. A version of you who isn't chasing peace, but living in it. A version of you that no circumstance can break. Your greatest growth won't come when everything is going right. It'll come when everything you once believed about yourself collapses, and you choose to rise anyway. That's when you finally meet who you were always meant to become. It's not enough to confront your ego once and assume the battle is over. That's the mistake most people make. They have one breakthrough, one moment of clarity, and they think they've conquered the voice that whispers lies in the quiet. But the ego isn't defeated once. It's patient. It's subtle. It regrows in silence, in the shadows of your daily routine, in the compliments you take too seriously and the criticism you take too personally. That's why it must be killed daily. Every morning you wake up, your ego does too. And if you're not careful, it will dress itself in nobility, in confidence, in false humility. It will hide behind your progress. It will convince you that you're safe, that you've evolved far enough. But listen to me. True strength requires vigilance. Just like a warrior sharpens his blade every day, you must sharpen your awareness. Because ego doesn't scream. It whispers. It returns as pride when you're praised. It returns as resentment when you're overlooked. It shows up when you compare yourself, when you need validation, when you seek control. And if you're not actively watching, it wraps itself around you until you start mistaking it for your identity. You must learn to catch it, not just in moments of success, but in moments of silence. In those in-between spaces, when no one's watching, when no one's clapping, when you're alone with your thoughts. What are you thinking in those moments? Are you dwelling on what others think of you? Are you replaying insults, building arguments you'll never say out loud just to feel superior? That's ego. It thrives in the stories you tell yourself when no one else is around to correct them. Killing the ego isn't about self-hatred, it's about self-honesty. It's the discipline to wake up each day and remind yourself, I am not above correction. I am not too evolved to listen. I am not beyond failure. And I will not measure my worth by how I compare to others, but by how honestly I confront myself. That's not weakness, that's power. Make it a ritual. Humility, not performance. Gratitude, not entitlement. Curiosity, not arrogance. When you wake up, ask yourself, what part of me today is trying to prove something? What part of me is trying to protect something false? And when you find it, don't run, don't justify it, expose it. Stand over it with clarity and discipline and choose something higher. Even in your victories, especially in your victories, be careful. Success is where the ego comes back with a new mask. It tells you you're special, unique, untouchable. It flatters you with false comfort. But if you listen too long, you stop growing. You start defending instead of learning. You start speaking more than listening. And you become the very thing you once promised yourself you'd never be. So keep the blade sharp. Practice letting go of the need to be right. Say, "I don't know," more often. Apologize without defending. Celebrate others without comparison. Accept feedback with curiosity, not shame. And do it again tomorrow and the next day. Because ego doesn't die once. It must be starved every single day. You'll know you're on the right path not when the ego is gone, but when it can no longer control you. When it speaks and you smile, knowing it's just another old echo. When someone offends you and it doesn't shake you. When someone praises you and it doesn't inflate you. That's freedom. And that kind of freedom can't be faked. It must be earned through the quiet, disciplined act of killing the ego, again and again. It will be uncomfortable. You'll lose attachments, identities, titles, but you'll gain something far greater: integrity, clarity, peace. Not because the world stops judging you, but because you've stopped needing their judgment to define you. That is the kind of man or woman who cannot be bought, broken, or swayed. Every day, strip away the ego, not once, daily, without applause, without reward, not for the world but for your soul. Because only in that empty space where the ego once sat will you meet the highest, most powerful version of yourself.